just wants one of you to confirm if you're able to see everything clearly at your end.
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, brilliant. All right. Well, welcome everyone to this exciting session today. Like Tushar mentioned, it's called the Intelligence Equation, where we're going to be talking about AI, EQ, and the future of work. Now, if you're in the chat box, this is a bit of an interactive session where you can chat with us, interact with us, ask us questions, and as and when the presentation is going on, I might be able to answer some of the queries that you have coming through. So the first one I'd put to you is, if any of you know what EQ is, do feel free to interact and let me know in the chat box. We're going to cover it as part of the presentation, but if you do know, feel free to interact and let your counterparts know as well. So we'll begin with a bit of introduction. I'll start with firstly talking about myself. So my name is Raveena, like I've been introduced by Tushar and Shakwat. I'm originally from Bangkok, Thailand, and I completed my master's here in the United Kingdom from the University of Oxford in 2016. I worked in education, specifically higher education, for over a decade now, and I'm currently the Director of Marketing and Admissions at Brunel Pathway College, which is part of that lovely company video that you just saw, Navitas. And I'm considered to be what you call a TCK. Now, a lot of you watching this video or this session today might have heard that term before, but if you haven't, I'll actually explain what that acronym means. But before I do, I'd like to show you the 3 flags which define me culturally. So I was born and raised in Thailand, but you might look at me and say that I don't actually look Thai. So I have some Indian origins, and I'm currently living and working in the UK. Now, this kind of cultural mix is often what's defined as TCK, and that's a third culture kid. And as you kind of navigate into global studies, your global careers, you'll be encountering a lot of people who are not just from a particular culture. They can't really culturally define themselves, and they are what they are called TCK. So it's quite essential as you navigate the current modern environment that you become familiar with this term. I might just breeze past this because Shakwat's done a wonderful job of explaining what Navitas is. Like he said, we're a global education provider. We work with 39 over different institutions. And Brunel Pathway College, where I sit, is actually, you can see, part of the European network of institutions. So that's specifically within the Navitas sector, where I'm the Director of Marketing and Admissions. Yeah, but before we carry on, I'd like to tell you very briefly about Brunel Pathway College, which is part of Navitas, and it offers pre-university degrees. So that includes foundation and pre-master's program that lead directly into the University of London. It's very close to central London, so just 45 minutes on the tube for those of you who've been to London before. And it's truly a multicultural institution with students and staff from all around the world. So we have students from 104 different countries and staff on site in the London office where I operate from over 15 different countries as well. So if we talk about the multicultural side of things, I'm going to talk about the workplace. And this is something for you to think about as you're thinking about your careers. You're going to be working in a global environment, what your work culture is potentially going to look like as you go into the workplace. So if I talk specifically about BPC, which is Brunel University of London Pathway College, I find the workplace culture that we are in to be very multicultural, dynamic. There's a lot of communication, there's a lot of teamwork, it's strong, it's fun. But the other thing about it is that because it's so multicultural and people are from various parts of the world, it can be a bit challenging. Communication becomes essential in our day-to-day, and also a bit of cultural sensitivity, which is what we're going to touch on a bit later. I often joke and say that as I walk around my tiny office and meet people from all around the world, I get a bit of a global tour because we've got colleagues, and which is probably going to be a global workplace that you work in the future. We've got colleagues from Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way from China, Singapore, Thailand. So it's really quite a really truly multicultural environment. So part of today's presentation is not going to be just talking about AI, but we're also going to be focusing on intercultural awareness, emotional intelligence, and how that all feeds into you becoming a really strong candidate for future jobs that you apply into. Obviously, as you're joining us today from Bangladesh, I wanted to kind of cater the presentation to what you'd experience at your end. And we're going to do a bit of comparison on the UK and Bangladesh work culture. As you can see, the two maps are up on the screen. And what I'd like to do is talk about something called the Hofstede framework. Some of you may have heard of it before, but Hofstede essentially refers to a person called Gert Hofstede, who came up with this framework. It's essentially 6 dimensions called the cultural dimensions theory. And the 6 dimensions essentially are power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, which has now been rebranded in the new age era into motivation towards achievements and success. The 4th being uncertainty avoidance. The 5th is long-term versus short-term orientation. And the last one is indulgence versus restraint. So the gray bit on the graph is United Kingdom and the orange is Bangladesh. I'll explain, you can digest this while I'm speaking through it, but I will explain point by point what each of these means. So if we begin with the very first one, power distance, I think you can tell from the name what it actually means. But power distance essentially in Bangladesh, you can see, has a very high score in comparison to the UK. So Bangladesh is scoring 80 out there on your screen. So hierarchies there are widely accepted, authority is very much respected, and people expect very clear guidance from their leaders. So you're working in Bangladesh, that might be, obviously this is all anecdotal. I'm not saying this applies a blanket thing to everyone, but it's interesting to understand the culture that you're operating in as well. Whereas in the UK, it's a very almost individualistic society. The UK values equality. They question the hierarchy quite a bit. The class system definitely still exists. So there is more of a strong belief in social mobility in the UK. So that's why you see the UK has a lower score for power distance. Now, the most interesting bit that I found was when we compared individualism. So individualism, Bangladesh actually has a score of 5, which is a deeply collectivist society, like a lot of other Asian cultures, where there's a lot of value placed on family and loyalty, and it's a very collectivist society. Whereas in the UK, it's the extreme opposite, highly individualistic, with a strong emphasis on privacy, personal responsibility. So if you're migrating for your studies or for your career to the UK, it is something that would be worth for you to be aware of prior to making your journey here as well. But when it comes to motivation towards achievement and success, which is the 3rd factor there, Bangladesh and UK, I would say, pretty much on par with each other. Bangladesh scoring 55, where success and competition are important and becoming increasingly important. It's a very results-driven society, results-driven approach. I mean, you can tell from my counterparts who are working today as well, very professional in the way they are doing things, very results-driven and ambitious. And the UK has a similar sort of work culture when it comes to achievements and success, very ambitious and performance-focused. If we're moving on to the 4th factor, which is uncertainty avoidance. Now, in uncertainty avoidance, Bangladesh scores high, which means the people out there prefer structure, clear rules, a long-term security. Innovation may be approached very cautiously, whereas they're much more comfortable with ambiguity and change, and plans are more flexible in that sort of an environment and society. If we're looking at long-term orientation, what you'll see is that in Bangladesh it has a lower score, which means tradition is valued with a focus on short-term goals and quick results. Now, I have to emphasize here and say that the lower scores just don't necessarily have a negative connotation or mean a bad thing. It's just to explain how the different societies operate in the current environment. Whereas in the UK, with a higher score on long-term orientation, it's more pragmatic, future-focused. My personal view, I'm not entirely sure if I agree with this score over here, because I do find a lot of countries in Asia can have a lot of long-term orientation, can be very future-focused. They plan for their future generations, save, and have that kind of focus as well. So again, this is something from the Hofstede measure. It's not set in stone, but it does give you an overall view and guidance on how different societies operate. And it's a really wonderful website. I can share the link after the presentation. You can pop in 2 different countries. So say you want to go to the US or you want to compare the US to the UK, you can pop in the names of both countries on the website, and it'll give you the whole map of how the Hofstede measure operates in all 6 dimensions across both cultures as well. Now, going to the very last one, which is indulgence versus restraint. Bangladesh is a much more restrained society where gratification is controlled and leisure is emphasized. Leisure is less emphasized, sorry. This is not, again, necessarily a bad thing, because I'm going to touch a bit later in the presentation on something called the marshmallow test. And if you've heard of that before, it's all about delaying instant gratification and how that has, let's say, positive impacts on your life later on. So it's a bit of a psychology test as well. So we'll touch on what the marshmallow test is a bit later. It's really interesting in case you haven't heard of it before. Whereas in the UK, it's very much an indulgent society. There's a culture of enjoyment and optimism and a very strong emphasis on fun, freedom, and leisure as well. Now, developing cultural sensitivity in lieu of all of these things becomes extremely important. So I love this image that I found online where a Japanese person is trying to greet an American and the American is trying to greet the Japanese and vice versa. Now, you can take it as you will, but for me, I see it as a very sweet way of both countries trying to adapt to the other's way of life and culture as well. If I can just request actually the presenters, if there's any way to get rid of the annotations on the slide that have just come up, that would be fabulous. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to move on to the AI bits of the presentation because we talked about it being the intelligence equation. So it's AI, EQ, and intercultural awareness. I might actually just attempt to stop sharing and then start sharing again to see if that helps with the annotations being removed. I think that may have helped as well. Okay, so while we're looking at this presentation, a lot of you might actually recognize this logo. If you know what it is, do feel free to let me know in the chat box. I think it's a logo that we've all come to know and recognize very prominently in the last year, if not even shorter, in the last couple of months. So who knows what this logo is? I think I'm seeing a couple of things come up in the chat box, even though I'm not actually able to see the responses. Yeah, ChatGPT, OpenAI, brilliant. Well done, everyone. So yeah, ChatGPT has almost become a new way of world and living for us, right? So what is actually ChatGPT? It is part of the new world artificial intelligence, which is defined as the ability of machines to perform tasks that normally human beings would be doing and would require human intelligence. So things like learning, reasoning, decision making could all slowly be cascaded to artificial intelligence and things like ChatGPT. Now, we are obviously only human, but if we're going into this new world era of artificial intelligence, what is actually things that AI could do? And these machines actually designed to mimic human cognitive functions and things like learning, language understanding, perception, problem solving, reasoning. So if we touch on each of these individually, learning could include things like machine learning. So it's acquiring information and rules for using. So for example, places like Amazon would use machine learning. A lot of you would know what machine learning is, but if you don't, I will provide a bit more of a detailed example of, for instance, how companies like Amazon use machine learning. There's also things like reasoning. So it uses rules to reach conclusions and make predictions. It identifies patterns. There's language understanding, which is ChatGPT is a great example of. You ask it a question, it's able to understand, digest, and give you some really detailed responses. A lot of us in our day-to-day lives are potentially using ChatGPT in order to help us with articles, emails, and other sorts of day-to-day tasks. Problem solving, so finding solutions to complex tasks. You can key in some data into ChatGPT and it might give you some really prominent solutions. It might help you plan your travel itinerary or do something a bit more complex. You have got a bunch of data that you want to analyze and draw conclusions from. You can pop it into ChatGPT and it might do that for you. Perception, so things like using sensors, cameras, microphone. Tesla, for instance, would be a great example of how artificial intelligence is used and perception technology is incorporated into their business ethos as well. Now, a lot of you would have seen this meme circulating earlier this year when ChatGPT had come out. It's a chai stall in South Asia. I've purposely put it in there because I think a lot of us might have actually seen it beforehand as well. And this clever person had called it Chai GPT, and the GPT actually stood for genuinely pure tea. How clever, right? At their end. And it's enhanced, and it goes on further to say enhanced with AI, adrak, and elaichi. I found this as a marketing director of marketing, I found this actually quite hilarious and really clever. And I think, yeah, we've got some comments coming in saying really clever marketing. I'm not exactly sure where it's from, but detecting from the font, I would say it's definitely not in Thailand. I've had a question come through. But I'm just going to use this image on the side to give you a bit of history on ChatGPT. And if all of us are using it, I think it's quite important for us to be aware of where it actually started in case you aren't. So it was launched in November 2022. It was in works way before November 2022, but that was essentially when it was launched. And within its first month, within December, ChatGPT reached 1 million users just within a couple of days of its launch. And it was a record for rapid adoption of any sort of AI platform. And currently in the world, an interesting stat to let you know that after the US, countries in South Asia are the second highest users of ChatGPT. When it came to January 2023, ChatGPT had surpassed over 100 million users. And as of December 2024, OpenAI announced that it's managing over 1 billion messages on a daily basis and has 300 million active users, which is insane to think about in this day and age. It means every second person is using AI or ChatGPT. Now, as I can see, I'm loving seeing all of the interaction that's coming out in the chat box. So we'll make it a bit more interactive. And in this section of the presentation, I would love for you to look at things that are coming up and let me know option A or B, which one do you think is AI generated? So we're going to look at AI generated text versus human generated text. So I'm using examples from my day-to-day workplace, which is Brunel Pathway College. And this is essentially something that I had to write up for a presentation. One of them is written by ChatGPT, and one of them is written by me, the human being. So I'd like for you to guess which one is written by ChatGPT and which one is written by humans. Okay, we're getting a mix of answers, actually. Some are saying A, some are saying B. To let you know, actually, A has been written by ChatGPT. And some of the telltale signs I think would be quite interesting for you to learn. So some of things like bolding of certain pieces of text, I think that's something that ChatGPT naturally does in order to emphasize certain messages. Other things like using really complex words. So for instance, the first sentence, it says, BPC constitutes an integrated preparatory institution offering structured progression to a broad range of industry-aligned undergraduate degrees. So it's a simple piece of text that they've added a lot of pizzazz to at their end. Whereas for me as a human being, I've just written it really simply saying the Pathway College offers industry aligned degrees with a direct pathway to the university. So a lot simpler, easier to digest. That being said, you could actually instruct AI to give you simpler terms. But in this case, the correct answer was A. Yeah, and someone said the elegance is detectable. Now, this image over here, I think should be fairly straightforward. Is it real or is it generated by AI? So option A is that it's real. Option B is that it's AI generated. Got a mix of answers, but yeah, more leaning towards B. Absolutely, yeah. It's Scarlett Johansson in that outfit. Looks very obvious that it is AI generated. Now, moving on to the next one. This is a LinkedIn post. Now, as a marketing person, often I have to do copywriting on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, I love copywriting and do a lot of my own, but I have started using ChatGPT in order to enhance and make sure that it stands out. So if all of you are on LinkedIn, either as students or as a professional, I think this one has a singular answer. No one's actually saying A. Correct, everyone, well done. The telltale signs, these emoji bullet points, just the style in which it is written. Again, the bolding of certain things, even though that's done in the human-generated version, I think it's at a glance, even without reading the text, you can tell that that's AI generated. And the last one being an Instagram post I had to put together in order to promote some scholarships. Now, which one do you think, even without reading the text, which one do you think is AI generated? Yeah, well done, everyone. It is A, and I think it's so obvious, right? I don't even have to explain the reasons why. But I actually find the second one much easier to read. So just to say we're offering £6,000 scholarship, bam. It's a lot simpler than having this detailed version. So the question I'd like to ask all of you, I think it was fairly obvious the answers to the couple of questions that I asked. If you as a layperson, if me as a layperson, we can detect AI generated text, don't you think your future employers or interviewers will be able to tell when your CV is AI generated, when your interview answers are AI generated? Of course they can, right? So I think it is really important for us to be smart in this day and age in our careers as we progress onto using AI, but using it carefully. So part of today's presentation is actually not to discourage you from using AI, but to encourage you to use it cleverly. So we are here, pun intended, to aid your success and make sure you're ahead of the game, always one bite at a time. So it's not just you who's using AI for interview practice or for writing your CVs or even your university applications at your age. A lot of ChatGPT is actually being used in HR processes now in order to reduce the hiring time. So you can see the ChatGPT adoption across various industries, be it education, the industry that I'm in, manufacturing, government, healthcare, marketing. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to come to that, but there's a really good comment out there from Mr. Sajib saying it is all about the prompt. You're absolutely right and hit the nail on the head there. But yeah, we're going to get to that in a second. And for me, this whole thing of AI becoming the rage and a lot of people getting scared about job losses reminds me of a time back in history when calculators had first come out, and there was a lot of scare amongst especially people in the education sector. I mean, when calculators first came out in 1986, there was a huge protest from teachers on the overuse of calculators and people becoming dependent on it and the loss of the ability to have basic mental math skills. And while all of that is true, I mean, even if you force it out of school curriculums, there is a realization that then to get out into the real world, calculators will be at their hand. Now it's on our phones, right? So there's no denying it, which is why this national curriculum actually started to incorporate it into their teaching methods. So there was a whole section called calculator methods for children aged between 8 to 11. And it's history repeating itself, right? We're not saying to avoid AI. We're just trying to figure out a way to adapt in this new world era. So there is still a lot of debate, and you can see a little newspaper article there that came out to say math teachers were protesting against the use of calculators. I think there's still some merits there. There's definitely been a loss of mental math, but if it is part and parcel of our day-to-day, there's no reason for educators and others to avoid it. But if I go back to the previous slide, just to debunk a couple of theories, you can see the adoption chart there across various businesses. So various industries have adopted AI, I think almost all of them. And you can see the adoption percentage there is all over 20%. So it's very much heavy usage period where we are now across all industries. And from the most interesting statement when AI was becoming popular, right? Or well, the most common rather than the most interesting is that AI and robots are going to take over our jobs. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And that graph on the top right-hand corner actually exists to debunk that theory. So that light blue line is the job gains that come from AI, and the dark blue line is the job losses that come from AI. So actually you can see the job gains as a result of AI are a lot higher than the job losses. So certainly the type of jobs might change. You might become an AI specialized engineer, or something to do with specifically in software engineering. So there'll be new world or new types of jobs that exist, but it's actually creating more jobs than we are losing. And 79% of business leaders are actually expecting AI to be part of their organization's transformation in the very near future, just in the next 3 years. So why leave ourselves behind and why not be part of that transformation? Almost 60% of adults believe that AI will lead to increased job creation, which has been proven in that graph that we're seeing on the top right-hand corner. And 91% of business leaders actually believe that generative AI will improve the organization's productivity. I mean, a lot of you are using AI smartly in the current era as well. So a lot of companies will be using it to enhance their productivity. Now, coming to, I think, the point that one of you made, it's all about the prompt. here's a slide to explain you actually how to stand out in this day and age. So I'm not saying don't use AI, but also don't completely have your CV generated or your university application generated from AI. Ironically, that image on the right-hand corner has been generated by AI to explain this point, but I think it does that really well. So certainly use AI to brainstorm, maybe put in some thoughts, ask it questions, get some idea generation from it, use really clever, detailed prompts, which was basically the point that someone had made in the chat. And I always have this belief of garbage in, garbage out. So basically, if you feed in rubbish prompts into AI, you're really not going to get very productive answers from them. So it's all about the prompts and what you feed into the system. So as detailed as you can be. Definitely reduce your over-reliance on AI. So you're not just kind of completely having your CV generated and then sending it across to a recruiter. You want to verify the outputs, make sure that it sounds like you. Because if your CV looks too perfect and you actually end up at the interview and you don't come across as your CV, I mean, you were able to detect AI so promptly, right? Your interviewer or HR person will be able to do the same. And the most important thing is actually to be able to live up to your CV. You don't want that whole Instagram versus reality situation where, you have this beautiful image of a coffee shop and you walk in and it's only one corner that's pretty and the rest of it doesn't look great. So you don't want that with people meeting you or interviewing you for the first time. So as much as you can, be authentic. In this day and age, authenticity holds a lot of value and merit as well. One exciting thing actually I'd like to share is that as part of today's session, all of you will be receiving this free employability pack. It's over a 20-page guide with little workshopy bits for you to kind of use, think about, take away with yourselves. It's a PDF free of charge for everyone attending this webinar. So I'll share this with the organizers and they can then forward it across to you, but it's exclusively for today's webinars attendees and it has some really, really interesting things there. Again, just a request to the organizers. I don't know if we can get rid of the annotations, but if not, I might just do the whole reshare thing again. I might give it a minute in case someone is able to help
Raveena, can you
sort
please
it
do
out.
that if that's
Yeah,
possible?
okay,
Thank you.
sure, no worries. Yeah, and I just request everyone, if you're trying to write something, actually to use the chat box, because it just makes the annotation is actually will make it a bit difficult for people to read the slide deck. Okay. Now I'd like to move on to the different types of AI. So I think all of you will be familiar with narrow AI, which is simple things like facial detection, chatbot, recommendation systems. But there's also strong AI, which is hypothetical AI to perform any intellectual task that a human can do. So actually ChatGPT would be a great example of that, supporting you with maybe analyzing complex data, coming to conclusions and recommendations for certain things. Developing a travel itinerary if you're traveling somewhere. And then super intelligent AI, something that's for the future. It's a future concept where AI will eventually surpass human intelligence. And I'd actually like to showcase now how companies in today's day and age are actually using AI. So I touch a little bit on machine learning and how Amazon is using it. So Amazon uses machine learning really, really well. And in case you don't know how they use it, a great example of it would be, say Amazon's just launched, I go onto the website and buy a coloring book. And alongside that, I buy some color pencils. Now, after 100 customers do the exact same thing, the machine learning platform picks up that there's a pattern there. Every time, or most people, when they buy a coloring book, they always end up buying a color pencil. Now that it's learned that data, for the 101st person that walks into the platform, they're automatically going to be recommending the coloring pencil. And obviously, this is fantastic for businesses. It helps them grow. And the coloring book is a really minute example. There's just so many things that you can do with machine learning, and Amazon is a perfect example of how they do that. There's also cognitive reasoning. So often IBM Watson uses artificial intelligence for various things. And one of the good examples of it would be doctors giving medical diagnosis as well. It also helps businesses analyze data, automate processes. Google uses problem solving. So it uses a tool called DeepMind, which is owned by Google, and they develop things like AlphaGo, AlphaZero, which are AI systems that solve really complex strategy games like chess. So for instance, you're able to play chess against AI, and AI might even win. Tesla, I think we talked about perception and how Tesla uses perception software. So things like objects in self-driving, facial detection. So if you've ever been in a Tesla car, you might actually see, when a human is crossing the road, you'll see the figurine come up on the screen. So that's all part of the AI perception technology that Tesla is using. Now, here again in the chat box, to make it a bit interactive, I want you to think about some real world examples of AI. So to get you started, I've given some examples. So things like your virtual assistants, Siri, Alexa, some self-driving cars, Amazon and Netflix recommendations. If you're always watching action movies, then Netflix is recommending more action movies to you. Fraud detection systems in banking. Is there any other type of real world day-to-day AI that you can think of? Do let me know in the chat box. I might give it a few seconds actually to just to allow you to put your thinking caps on. Facebook, yeah. Siri, Google, YouTube recommendations, Gemini, yeah, some really, really fantastic examples coming out there. CV shortlisting used by HR. Yeah, brilliant. So other things like chatbots, facial recognition, some predictive text. So, when you're writing your emails, it kind of recommends what you should put forth. These are all day-to-day examples of how AI is used. I'm loving seeing all of the examples come through in the chat. Keep them coming. As much as we've been talking about the positives of AI, it's quite important for us to know that it's still very much new, not as regulated. I think we're all aware of when Meta was not as regulated and has so much power. So I think it's important for us to understand the risks behind AI as well, which is why we talked, how to kind of stand out by saying not being over-reliant on it. And that has not just implications for producing a great CV, but also moral and ethical implications as well. So here's some of the risks of AI. There's bias and discrimination. So AI may amplify existing human biases. So we need to have really strong privacy laws, encryption. We always say don't put in names, don't put in sensitive data into AI. There's also a very big risk of privacy invasion. So again, if you're putting in too much information into AI, there's something you need to be conscious of until it becomes regulated. And this is something that even the people who created ChatGPT are very conscious of and encourage people to be quite sensitive with the data they're putting in. There's also a big risk of misinformation and deep fakes. I mean, there's been movies that have been created about deep fakes, documentaries. So it's quite crucial for us to be aware that AI might be used to spread misinformation, and also lack of accountability. Now, AI makes a decision, asks you to do something, and it goes really wrong. It's not always clear who is responsible at the end of the day. It's not like you can take ChatGPT to a court of law and hold them accountable. So there's all of these big risks associated with AI as well. So that was my spiel on AI. Obviously, if there are any thoughts on anything that comes up, do feel free to let me know. But now I'd like to move on to the second half of the presentation, which is EQ, emotional intelligence. Now, I personally love this topic. And I want to ask everyone, what is emotional intelligence to you? Now, emotional intelligence, essentially, if you look at this image, it might give you the definition of what emotional intelligence is, but it's basically the ability to understand, manage, and use emotions effectively in yourself and others. So for instance, that person with EQ cleverly just brought an umbrella, managed the situation, is having a happy-go-lucky day. Whereas the other person, like a manager in a meeting who's constantly getting stressed, is frustrated with their team members, could be someone who has really low EQ. So, I mean, it's great to be, very tech savvy and use AI, but if you don't have the right level of emotional intelligence, which is something that AI can't replicate just yet, you might actually get left behind in the game. So again, a little bit about emotional intelligence. Yeah, all of the wonderful definitions coming through in the chat. Absolutely. Understand, feel, analyze, and manage emotions, how to control our mind, all wonderful definitions there. So this was actually something that was not created, to be quite clear, by Daniel Coleman. It was a concept that existed before came in 1995 and really popularized the concept. And he defined emotional intelligence as the ability to identify, assess, and control one's emotions and the emotions of others and that of groups. So this was, yeah, like I said, popularized by him, but not created by him. And that is a book that's been written by him on that matter. Really interesting read. Highly recommend it in case you haven't read it beforehand as well. Feel free to take a screenshot or write down the name in case you're interested. So there's quite a few things that fall under the emotional intelligence bucket, and that's things like self-awareness, relationship building, social awareness, empathy, all crucial skills that are needed, not just as you're navigating the workplace, but even your day-to-day in your classroom, with your fellow classmates, with your teachers, with whichever university you progress onto as well. But just to give you a couple of examples of how EQ is used, incorporated, and actually very much valued in the workplace is some examples of key leaders who've used EQ in the workplace. So I put two examples that I thought were brilliant. So one is the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, who is known for his empathy and transformational leadership. And he actually introduced something called learn it all versus know it all, which I think was a wonderful concept. So if you've managed to bag a job at a company like Microsoft, it can be quite daunting and it may seem like you're expected to know everything on day one. And he introduced this concept called learn it all rather than being a know-it-all. And his mindset actually really helped employees feel a lot more empowered and encouraged in the workplace. And he's truly known for his transformational leadership as well. The other one was Sheryl Sandberg. Now she's written a really famous book as well, and I think a lot of you might know her story when she lost her husband and had to come back into the workplace and how she navigated grief and was quite vulnerable and open about it. And because she was the CEO of Meta or Facebook at the time, I think someone doing that at that level really opened the floor for being vulnerable and understanding in the workplace. I mean, sometimes in these big corporates, you might just think you're a number or a machine. But I think having that human element and realizing that at the end of the day, it is about people having that kind of empathy. And it's not just about just being resilient and operating as a machine. So I think these two people, really wonderful leaders. Sheryl Sandberg has a book which you can read as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend looking more into their profiles if you want to be inspired about their leadership styles. So if you look at EQ as an employability skill, you need to have a variety of aspects and skills that you think that you might have to be born with, but actually you can grow into these various skills. So things like self-awareness, emotional balance, having a positive outlook while still being authentic, having adaptability, empathy, all creates this kind of focus in your work while still being a thought leader, empathetic in your workplace. And it actually helps you kind of remain calm in tough situations as well. And it's actually, you'll be surprised, it's a skill set that employers do truly look for in the workplace. Now, just to explain the value of developing EQ, you might think that EQ or EI is an abstract concept and it's not actually used. You'd be surprised to know that in a lot of public schools and in a lot of corporates, it's actually taught as a skill. And it can explain why some average people are incredibly successful, while some geniuses who may not have as high a EQ fail to live up to their promise. They might have all of the skill set, but if they don't have high level of emotional intelligence, it does curb their chances for success. So I can't stress the importance of this. Now, I think, does anyone want to guess what topic we might want to get into at this stage by looking at the image on your screen? I'll give it a second in case anyway. Marshmallows. Yeah, it's marshmallows. It's about the marshmallow technique. It's called marshmallow test. So yeah, well done, Aswad, for nailing it exactly as it's called, the marshmallow test. So the marshmallow test is actually a psychological experiment that was testing children's ability to delay gratification. So what it did was, it was an experiment where they put children into a room and they gave them one marshmallow and they said, if you're able to wait for 15 minutes, we'll come back at the end of the 15 minutes and give you two marshmallows. And they left the room. So the children didn't know they were being recorded, they were being watched, and some of them were able to wait 15 minutes, whilst the others kind of went for that one marshmallow and didn't want to wait those 15 minutes, went for the instant gratification. And there's a book about it called The Marshmallow Test, and it's by Walter Mischel. So if you want to read about it, it's really interesting. But the experiment then followed these children for 40 years of their life, almost all of their life. And what they found was those who were able to delay gratification and wait those 15 minutes for those two marshmallows actually did better. So they were able to show restraint, they were able to perform better in their careers, and overall, they just had much more successful outcomes in their life. So it's a really interesting study about delaying gratification. And again, yeah, highly recommend that book by Walter Mischel as well. So again, this is a really strong example of how emotional intelligence can help you be clever in the workplace and actually get more for your buck eventually as well. And emotional intelligence is actually proven to be twice as important as technical skills, especially in leadership roles. So, I mean, all of you listening in today, you don't just want to be in the workforce, yeah? You want to be succeeding, you want to be the leaders of tomorrow. So I think having not just the whole how to use AI and being smart with it ability, but having emotional intelligence is really, really important as well. I'm conscious of time, so I'm actually just going to breeze past this next section, which is international cultural awareness as an employability skill for the workplace. Now, we've talked various acronyms today, right? We've talked EQ, we've talked AI, and now this is actually the opposite of AI. It is IA, which is intercultural awareness. So what is actually intercultural awareness? And I mean, I touched at the very beginning of the presentation on this concept of TCK, third culture kids. So it's the willingness and the ability to realize the need for social changes, understand things in an international context, especially if you're working with global environments and connecting between different cultural groups, whether that's in your day-to-day or in a global workplace as well. So intercultural awareness actually links to intercultural communication. And what I mean by this is not just language, it's actually going beyond the language barriers, being able to understand why people from a certain culture would operate in a different way, and being quite sensitive to it as well. So for instance, give you an example of a workplace where we had to throw a party during Ramadan time, and we had to bring in food for everyone. So what we did for colleagues who were practicing at that time, create little lunch boxes. So they had the same food, but they could use it when they break fast. So I think that kind of thing for corporates, even for you as young, to be young professionals and leaders of the future, to be aware of, to have that kind of intercultural awareness and being able to integrate everyone into the workplace as well. Cultural awareness has a lot of the skill set that you would think EQ would require. So things like emotional stability, being open-minded, being flexible, almost unlearning what you learned. So if you've only grown up in one culture, you might have to unlearn some of the biases that you had and be a lot more open-minded, and be culturally aware. And like I said, a lot of you would be eventually operating in a global workplace. Now, UK, for instance, and especially a place like London, is considered to be a melting pot of different cultures and environments as well. So the UK is actually still one of the most popular destinations for international students to come and study, which is why companies like Navitas or Educo still exist and are strong in sending students to places like the UK, not just only the UK, places like the UK. And I'm speaking specifically for the UK. There's a stat that says 83% of job descriptions have a requirement or a strong preference for international and cross-cultural team experience. So even if you come here for your studies or just want to work in a global workplace for a short time, that actually holds a lot of value in your CV. Yeah, and I mean, I've always heard this phrase, right, that says curiosity killed the cat. But I think if curiosity done well, it's important that you ask questions. If there's something I'm not aware about the Bangladeshi culture, if something you're not aware about the Indian or Thai culture, it's important you ask questions in a culturally sensitive manner. So there's nothing wrong with being curious. So I always say it's not curiosity that killed the cat. It was ignorance that killed the cat, and curiosity was framed. So yeah, I mean, it's a quote I love, but something you can take away from the presentation. And obviously, we are talking about prepping ourselves for working in an intercultural environment, but there's also a lot of natural benefits that come from working in a truly, truly international environment or an international university. There's a lot of creative flow, new ideas and insights. You get a lot of local market knowledge. I mean, I'm just going to use my example at Navitas. We've got my colleague Shakwat, who gave you that wonderful Navitas spiel at the beginning. He's working in the Bangladeshi market, and he can obviously give me insights that I wouldn't have sitting here. So being able to work cross cultures and really using that advantage of local market knowledge can be so essential for companies to grow. I mean, take McDonald's, for example, right? They have different menus in different parts of the world. If they didn't have local people who gave them that information, they would never be able to have, I don't know, a aloo tikki burger in India versus, a black rice burger in Korea versus the traditional one in the US. So I think that having that local market knowledge can really help businesses grow and thrive. Obviously, there are challenges as well, so you have to be quite adept to the current day and age. It requires a lot of professional communication, and things can be misinterpreted. So you have to be quite cautious when you're operating in that kind of an environment. Um, I'm actually almost towards the end of my presentation, but I do want to give you a little bit of a reminder, which I'm sure my Tushar will jump in and say as well. At the end of the presentation, there's going to be an MCQ, a multiple choice questionnaire, which you can answer. So a lot of what I talked about today will be in the presentation, but just to help you, a little bit of a cheat sheet. One of the questions is actually going to be on the Hofstede framework. And the 6 dimensions. So just to remind you again what it was when we compared the UK-Bangladesh culture, it was power distance, indulgence versus restraint, long-term versus short-term orientation, masculinity versus femininity, which is also called achievement and success now, tolerance of uncertainty, and individuality. So I'm actually helping you a little bit with that quiz over here, just to let you know it's going to be coming your way at the end of the presentation. Now, like I said, we talked about various acronyms, right? We talked about EQ, AI, and IA. And if you put it all together, it almost sounds very IKEA, like the furniture store in Sweden. And as much as I love my acronyms, it's actually quite important to have all 3 skills. I might joke about it, but it is essential to have the balance of all 3 things. And what I mean from that is that basically, as AI grows more capable, you can see the speed at which it's expanding. It won't replace us, it'll just amplify us. But to thrive in this new world era, in this future, we must lead with what machines can't replicate, which is things like empathy, intuition, creativity, connection. And emotional intelligence is now no longer just a soft skill. It used to be considered a soft skill, but in my view, it's now a superpower. So when we combine speed and precision with AI, and the depth of humanity and using emotional intelligence, we can actually unlock a workplace that's not only smarter, but also kinder, more inclusive, and truly, truly innovative. And it's really important I pass on this message to you as leaders of tomorrow and end the presentation by saying that the future of work isn't just about humans versus machines, it's about humans with machines. So it's a bit like the calculator situation. We have to adapt it in our day-to-day lives. So let's build that future with intention, intelligence, including artificial intelligence, and a lot of heart. And I think that's actually everything from me. I'm going to leave that quote on the slide. But yeah, in case anyone has any final questions, or if Tushar, you want to jump back on, I actually might pass the baton back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raveena. It was actually a very insightful session. Um, so I've got my glasses on. That means the question answer session will take place, but not here. We will be sharing with you all a Google form right now. And there will be 10 questions on that form. You will have 20 minutes to answer those questions. And well, you will need to, unfortunately, you need to put up your passport ID or your NID, whichever you have with you, with your full name and your email address on the form. So it should be about 20 minutes. You cannot re-enter the form once you have done. So be mindful of that. You will get one chance to get in the form right now as we close this session. So save the link. You would need to score minimum of 70%. But don't fret. It's going to be all about the things that Raveena have talked about today. So Well, if there is no questions within 1 week, the ones who have been able to answer at least 7 out of the 10 questions correctly, or all the 10 questions correctly, will get the certification, a certification of artificial intelligence from Brunel University, London Pathway College, and co-powered by Educo and Navitas as well. So again, Raveena, thank you so much for enlightening us with such an amazing session. I hope it was helpful to all of you who have joined in today. Again, one more time, we'll put that down in the chat box, the link that you will require to answer. And with that, thank you so much. We'll call it off now. May we please have the link again, Maruf Bhai, on the chat box once more. Yeah, so the link is there. Let me share it once more, just the link with everybody. There you go. So thank you, Raveena. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It was a great session. I hope we'll have another student development program very soon, maybe with Raveena, maybe with some other expert across the world, wherever it comes. So with that, thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye.